Exploring Absolon, the gender politics of Geoffrey Chaucer's The Miller's Tale. Absolon of The Miller's Tale is a literary anomaly in that he is intricately detailed. In fact, more so than other major players in the story he occupies. Yet he not only seems arbitrarily placed within a narrative that is formulated largely without him, but he is also not particularly a likable or charismatic character. Thus, in the conclusion of the story, it is easy to accept him as the fool who endures folly. Absalom cannot achieve happiness in his existence and seems perpetually torn between the worlds of the ecclesiastical versus the mundane. What is the source of this conflict? What are the origins of Absalom's internal flaws, particularly when put in comparison with Nicholas? What is Absalom's purpose in the narrative given the work's genre? What personality traits with which Chaucer intentionally imbued Absalom serve as clues to the sentence of the story? Would the reader's perception of Absalom during Chaucer's time be any different or more revealing than our contemporary conceptualizations? These are the concerns that I hope to subsequently address within this paper. Absolon is introduced as a man who fulfills many different roles. That of church clerk is the simplest to decipher naturally, as it is stated most clearly. However, in addition to this, he is obviously also has a preoccupation with hair, so he is as barber is also likely he is noted for being perfectly coiffed in the text. He is able to wake his good friend with the smith in the middle of the night, and there is strong evidence that smiths and barbers were part of the same guild for at least a century at this time the tale was written, as were wafer makers, which makes sense because all require the heating and use of metal. Barbers were also surgeons for bloodletting, and as the tale later illustrates, Absalom has no reservations in cauterizing Nicholas's opening. Absalom's unusually colorful red, white, and blue dress may also have something to do with advertising these services, as red and white were commonly accepted as colors of the barber surgeons, according to court edicts of the time. I certainly agree that there is ample proof in the text to facilitate the belief that Absalom performed these occupations simultaneously. However, the concept that Absalom's flamboyant dress is in essence an advertisement, I believe, is to be unlikely, because I believe that it is rather an outward sign of his youthful immaturity and virginal purity, for which there are more than enough allusions in the text to support a view of the awkward Absalom as being an inexperienced and naive teenager with disoriented infatuation. The view of Absolon as a naive, disoriented teen may absolve him too much of psychological precepts that lend themselves to making him an egotistical, delusional misogynist. We shouldn't forget that the Coulter was intended for Alusun's nether and that what the nether exactly is, it seems to inspire way more thought on the part of scholars than I would expect. Most say it is one or the other, and I was surprised to find that one writer believed that Absolon could potentially be a cross-dresser and actually male in theory. That really surprised me, as it seemed a long shot. I go with the likelihood of both parts of the nether yea, in my opinion. Then there is the interjection of the tale is an analogy from the book of Exodus, in which God shows Moses the mysteries of his backside in the crack of a rock, which is further expounded upon by the association of women and their mysteries as presented in the Wife of Bath's tale, which is juxtaposed with the holy mysteries. Then this I find humorous at best, but for the sake of thoroughness, I must say that it is a creative analogy. The word privité is mentioned as having multiple meanings, mostly as synonym for secret and private parts. This hypothesis is furthered by way of an art history twist that during the time of the tale's writing here, there was a trend to give depictions of the Christ's genitals and buttocks to show his existence as being mortal, being made wholly incarnate. It seems a central force of this line of thought that it would offer medieval audiences a hint of blasphemy in their reading matter by skirting the line, a technique that is still popular in entertainment today. This question of the significance of human anatomy, in my mind, pales in comparison with the questioning of Absolon's actions after the kiss. The instant loss of Absolon's desire for Aluson, his infuriation, and then his subsequent desire for swift revenge. He expects Aluson to offer up the same when he returns, not knowing that Nicholas has other plans, of course. But even the powerful gust that Nicholas musters for Absolon must, when he returns, pales in comparison to the insult that was kindled by Aluson and at first. This is a matter that seems to inspire various interpretations, from Freudian interpretations based on a theory known as the Medusa complex, in which a young boy faces the concept of his own potential castration by seeing a mature vagina for the first time, to the Bakhtian notion, which accompanies Freud, involving oral fixation that overpowers Absolon's consciousness entirely. The second theory is that the barber surgeon Absolon intends to cure Aluson of her hedonistic anal opening, a medical practice popularized at the time of this tale's writing. There is also the suggestion that Absolon has based his idealistic vision on the Virgin Mary as portrayed in various Annunciation and Nativity plays, of which there are writings from Saint Bridget of Sweden and Saint Simeon. These writings portray the belief of the conception and birth of Christ as pleasurable, completely comfortable, and entirely removed from the worldly event as occurs to lesser mortals. I reserve comment for, while I do think the question is intriguing, I also find no proof within the text to suggest one side over the another, with the noted exception that the inner nature of Absalom is questionable and Aluson is justified in spurning his love as proven by his subsequent actions. Of course, The biblical interpretations of events portrayed within the Miller's tale do not end with Alison's dissimilarity to the Virgin Mother in Absalon's view. The genre of which the story is part, the fabliau, is typically associated with frank sexual themes as well as the erotic triangle, including John, Nicholas, and Alison, which distinctly indicates Absalon as a wild card in the deck with regard to the typical composition. This can be explained by way of the popular notion in literature at the time of parish clerks being incessantly amorous, however unable to effectively play out their desire, thus forming the apex of the fabliau comedy. The biblical connection to this fabliau is found in Joseph's troubles about Mary, a popular, if somewhat subversive, dramatic notion at the time. Essentially, Joseph questions whether his wife has been impregnated by a mortal man, leaving him to face humiliation. It is suggested that Chaucer took to this normally tragic tale and made a parody of it within this tale. Proof such as the song of the Angelus ad Virginiam that Nicholas plays to seduce Alison endorses this notion. I think it is highly likely, as it would fit with the portrait of Chaucer as apt social commentator and someone who was comparatively well informed during his lifetime with regards to news and trends of the day. It has also been suggested that Chaucer may have been taunting the diatribes concerning the Virgin Mother's intact body and its overly explicit descriptions that were so numerous during his time. I think this is highly likely because, if for no other reason, it would serve as an easy target. At first glance, Absolon seems to portray the epitome of the squeamish, effeminate pansy. However, this would be inappropriate for the culture and the period, or surprising at least. While Absolon can only artificially imitate the traits Nicholas seems to inherently possess, such as the ability to smell of sweet herbs or play and sing sacred music romantically, it is not the premise on which the tale is built, I believe. Absalon's view of ideal womanhood are what lay in question here. The notion that femininity was such a threat to male-dominated society at the time that the idealized vision of a woman was closer to that of the effeminate male than to the female body with its inherent openness and fluids, which seems highly likely considering the tribulations a woman was forced to endure to join a pious order. Even today, before a nun takes her vows, her hair is cut short. She undergoes fasting for purification and she wears shapeless clothing. This completely plays down the outer signs of womanhood. Not only is this evident in Christianity, it occurs in Buddhist nunneries and Muslim cultures, to name only a few others. Even the Greek and Sumerian ritualized virgins were forbidden to leave their places of worship. So it is entirely feasible that Absalon was completely unprepared to deal with a woman he had only gazed at from afar. Once he came closer to the object of his desires, he was not only repulsed with the reality, possibly due to his own narcissism, but in fact, it was such a shock that it subsequently drove him into a psychotic breakdown. Put into this context, his actions can almost be understood in context with regard to the haute culture. I would like to believe that this was Chaucer's bid towards liberating womankind from the shackles of the virgin whore complex, that through stating that if all women must be likened to the Virgin Mary, Virgin Mother, then naturally all men must be likened to Absolon. This tale would undoubtedly take on significantly more humorous connotations today if we were aware of its particular time and place specific references. Just as it would be an impossibility to communicate to someone of Chaucer's era an understanding of something as everyday as an episode of The Simpsons, it is equally impossible to truly comprehend the reading matter of Chaucer in the exact same way as a member of the court would during his lifetime. Even dictionaries, which may offer a summary of meaning, cannot convey all of the culturally implicit tangents that a word or idiom may take on. But that is not to say that we should not try to comprehend the mysteries of historical works, only that I believe it is a tenuous proposition and one that should be handled with care on the part of the academic. Chaucer seems to have provided the academic world with ample opportunity to speculate about his motives, the origins of his tales, and indeed his very lifetime. He warrants numerous journals for the open discussion of new ideas concerning possible underlying meaning within his works. I find it fascinating that perhaps more than any other author, Chaucer garners such arduous study. I think that it is significant that Chaucer wrote in his leisure time. It was not his primary source of income, and I find this to be a major impetus for me to firmly believe that above all, he desired his works to be entertaining or cathartic for himself. Most astounding to me is that his works have survived so well over the centuries, the story behind which must be incredibly intriguing. I am prompted to wonder what Chaucer's wife thought of his body of creative work. Was she supportive or influential towards his creative works? I am tempted to say so, if for no other reason, because Chaucer was so prolific. I believe so. I imagine she enabled his work as opposed to hindering it. It would be intriguing to if new facts came to light that cast a decisive intent to Chaucer's well-known works. I wonder if perhaps he did not write them down only for his own amusement, but also for his wife. It would certainly give scholars even more to discuss for centuries to come. All right. Well, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. This has been my little espousing about the Miller's Tale in Chaucer, and I appreciate your tuning in. Take care. Thanks so much.